trained as an architect rather than as a photographer, and I was always interested in the work of Foster and Partners. I'd seen it as a student. I'd looked at the magazines when I'd been studying. I think the projects like the Carried Art and the Hong Kong Bank were always in the architectural review, so I was very familiar with the work. But I joined by almost a strange coincidence that I was quite good at photography when I was a student, and when I started working, I worked with Terry Farrell's office initially, and I used to take a lot of photographs of models, some of the buildings as well, which is just an add-on to the work that I was doing. And I was approached by Foster and Partners to come and work as a photographer, which was not really what I had planned for my life. I was quite happy working as an architect, but then you think, well, actually, this is maybe an interesting opportunity. So I decided to take it on. So that's how I ended up. So it wasn't a plan, and it wasn't something I've been aiming for, but actually it was a very good decision in the end. So very happy I made it. I joined the practice in 1996, 25 years ago, and I think the first time I met Norman was when he briefed me to do some photography for the World Squares project in Trafalgar Square. And it was quite an interesting briefing. He asked me to take pictures of people's feet, which may not have been your first thoughts when photographing Trafalgar Square. You might have been thinking of Nelson's Column or the National Gallery, but Norman was preoccupied with points of contact, things that came into contact with the square, whether it was pigeons' feet or wheelchairs or people walking, whether it's high heel shoes, whether it was policemen's boots, but he wanted lots of pictures of feet. So I went away and I grovelled on the floor and I took pictures of people's feet from low down, which got some very strange looks from the passers-by, but actually we used them in the presentation, and it was quite successful. So it was an unusual introduction to working with Norman, but quite fun. Working with Norman has always been a really interesting challenge, because I'm really interested in explaining architecture to other people, and to work directly with Norman gives me an opportunity to explain what Norman's thinking about architecture, what Norman wants to convey, because he'll be using my photographs, my images as part of presentations, and to give him the material to explain what preoccupies him and what interests him and what ideas he's trying to get across. It really is my role here, which is a fantastic opportunity because it's something I love doing. Norman once said to me that the process of design and actually constructing a building can sometimes be at least as interesting, if not more interesting, than the final project. And if you don't record that process and those elements of the design as you go along, you've missed it, because you can't go back afterwards and do it. You can always go back to the building and take more photographs, but the way that the special parts were designed or fabricated, the way it was constructed, the design process, the way that you sketched, the way that you made models, the options that you looked at that got you to that amazing final solution. If you don't record them as you go along, then you've missed it. It's been really fascinating to work with Norman, to try to understand his thought processes, because part of my role is to illustrate those thought processes, but it's also fascinating as an individual to be able to watch what those thought processes are. So I think I remember one particular project which we worked on, which was for the Norman Foster on Art exhibition in the Carried Art, which was partly to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the completion of the Carried Art, but was an amazing opportunity for Norman to showcase his interest in different artists. And I found it particularly fascinating because I went along on most of the occasions when Norman was curating the exhibition and physically putting it together, actually on site in Nîmes. And to see the way both the selection of the art that he made, which is very personal, but also the way he put it together, and every piece had to be perfectly located next to another piece that has a relationship to it. So every room was very carefully curated. And Norman literally stood there and said, a little bit higher, a little bit lower, a little bit to the left, put this one over here, put this one over there. And he looked at every single detail, and the curating of the exhibition was as fascinating as the construction of a building, because that's the level of detail that Norman likes to he can't work in any other way. He has to think everything through. So it was fascinating for me to document that just as a fly on the wall, if you like, as an observer. I'm frequently asked what my favourite building is that I've photographed during my time working with the practice, and I can never answer that question because there's too many good buildings. I know to pick one is like picking your favourite child, and all my children are my favourites, so I have to give a different answer. And I think the answer is that sometimes it's the experience of photographing the buildings which sticks in the memory. And I can remember, I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. I remember very clearly photographing the Reichstag when it was completed, and the day that it was handed over to the public to occupy the building, and it was such a magical time to be there. When the ramps in the dome became full of the people from Berlin celebrating the opening of this building, which was just a magical thing to see. Another example, I loved photographing the construction of the Millennium Bridge in London. From the very beginning, I can remember being asked by Norman to go up in a helicopter to take photographs of the site from above, because he was interested in showing the bridge as part of London as for the original competition we did. So this is before we'd even won the competition, and it was a very London day. It was a very grey day, very grimy weather, and you could hardly see anything from the helicopter. And I remember seeing looking into the distance and seeing a ray of sunlight coming towards down the river. And so we hovered in position to take a photograph and waited for this blade of light to come and cut across the river, and it joined the St Paul's Cathedral and the Tate Gallery, and just took one photograph, and that became the basis for the rendering images, which were entered for the competition, and we won the competition. And I don't know if that was the image that won the competition, probably not, but it's nice to feel I made a contribution.